Composed, a novella by J.E. Novotny. Part 7. Camilla was relieved to step into the warmth of Lady Marta's foyer. She had chosen to walk from the theatre as her new acquaintance, she dared not hope for a friend so soon, lived quite close, only a few blocks away. But the days were still rather short and the nights were chilly. Lady Marta's home was a tall, narrow townhouse packed between two others just like it. Its one distinguishing feature was the bright blue front door with a gleaming brass knocker. The foyer was sophisticated yet cozy, which, Camilla thought, was rather hard to pull off among the nobility, at least in her experience. It was much like Lady Marta herself, come to think of it. Marta greeted her in the entryway as the butler was taking her coat. After the man disappeared with it, Marta said, "I'm very pleased you chose not to bring Mr. Fleetman. I wanted a chance to talk with you frankly. There isn't time just yet, but later, after our meal." Marta ushered her towards an open door at the end of the short hall and added, "And I'm even happier that you listened to my request not to bring the instrument this evening. I want you to have a good time." Camilla's gaze swept across the room, briefly taking in the heavy wooden shelves housing leather-bound books alongside wood-backed and paper volumes. A couple of sofas fitted with bright cotton covers took up the center of the room around a low table holding a half-full tray of champagne flutes, and two similarly upholstered chairs stood at each end of the room. There was a fire going in the hearth in the wall opposite the door, which was where most of the company appeared to be gathered. All, in fact, save one man standing by the window. He held a champagne flute loosely between two fingers and stared up at the moon. Camilla's heart did a strange flip-flop in her chest. Was it odd to say that she knew those fingers? She hoped that it wasn't because she recognized her composer by the long elegance of his fingers, which had directed her playing more than once now in the hunting cottage. "My dear," Lady Marta said with a small mew of consternation. "I'm sorry, Lady Marta, what did you say?" "I said his name is Lord Dmitri, and he's in disgrace. But I've a soft spot for him, so he's always welcome here. He's musical, too, and I think you'll get along well, so I've sat you together for dinner. Do you mind terribly that he's out of favor with the court?" "Not at all. I shall be delighted to know him," Camilla said. Marta's answering smile seemed to hold an edge of triumph, and Camilla wondered if she had, perhaps, given something away. "Splendid. I will introduce you now, and you can go in to dinner together in a few minutes." Camilla felt flutters in her stomach as they approached the composer. Dmitri, Marta had called him, and yet, even knowing his name, she could not help thinking of him as her composer instead. "Lord Dmitri, my special guest has arrived," Marta said. The man turned, and he looked bewildered for a moment before a cloak of serenity settled over his features. Camilla wondered why he bothered with the blue mask that usually covered so much of his face in the cottage when his face could so readily become a blank slate all on its own. "I trust you'll behave yourself. Lady Camilla, Lord Dmitri. Lord Dmitri, Lady Camilla," Marta continued. She was the perfect hostess, and Camilla was grateful for the older woman's poise. "Charmed, my lady," Dmitri said, bowing over her hand. She was struck by the resemblance between Dmitri and the man at the Empress's tea who had congratulated her at the end. "A pleasure, my lord. Marta tells me that you are musical," she said with a smile. Marta slipped away while they were smiling at one another in a slightly silly way. "Musical? Oh, once, I suppose," he said. Dmitri settled his bum against the low windowsill and stretched his long legs out in front of him. Camilla settled into the near armchair, tucking her skirts around her ankles. Dmitri chewed his lower lip in thought, and then said, "I suppose Marta mentioned I'm not very popular with the Emperor." "An odd topic to bring up with a new acquaintance, but please, do tell me all about it," Camilla said. But then the dinner bell rang, and Dmitri offered her his arm to escort her in to dinner. As Marta had promised, she and Dmitri were seated next to one another at the foot of the table. The first course was served, and the gathered company quickly devolved into duos and trios of animated chatter over their cold onion soup and crispy bread. Camilla had only been to a few dinners at this level of the social hierarchy, but Nathan had made sure to drill into her the correct utensils for which course, the correct glass for which portion of the evening, and all the minutiae that he seemed to love so much. For Nathan, it was a ritual. How interesting, by contrast, to see people raised in this world, for whom it was simply unconscious. She was not even sure that anyone would notice if she used the wrong utensil or sipped the water instead of the wine at the midpoint of the meal. There might be something registered as not quite right, but she doubted they would be able to pinpoint what that something was. She wanted to turn to Dmitri and talk to him about her observations, but she realized that it was not quite the same as speaking to her composer alone in the woods. There she had fancied him a bandit lord, a pirate of the land, or a wandering knight-errant watching for damsels likely to walk into trouble. But now she knew that he was nothing of the kind. He was a noble, a pampered lord by all indications. It changed something, and yet, what did it really change? He was still a charming, largely unknown man, and now that she had seen his face, she could confirm that her attraction to him extended beyond his composition skills. They spent the dinner talking and laughing together. The duo joined in with the conversations around them as seemed necessary or appropriate, but they were far more content to converse with one another. After dinner, Dmitri escorted her to the sitting room before leaving with the other men for the traditional post-dinner separation of the sexes. Camilla drifted instinctively to Lady Marta, who had settled in the central sofa of a semicircle in the center of the room. She served coffee and liqueurs for the first several minutes, but the small group of 10 women soon broke up into 2s and 3s around the room, and Camilla were left mostly alone around the refreshment table. "Well, how did you like the noble's dinner party?" Marta asked with a smile. "I hope that my brother-in-law didn't bore you too much. He can be quite reticent, though the two of you do seem to be getting on well." "Quite well, thank you. You were right that we share an interest in music," Camilla said. Marta frowned, but the expression was quickly wiped away and replaced with a look of amusement. "I'm glad to hear it. As I said, he's not quite in favor with the court at present, but he's a good man, I think." "You did mention that before, and he brought it up himself, but he didn't get around to explaining why. Why isn't he in favor, if I may ask?" Marta was silent for several moments, and Camilla wasn't certain that her hostess was going to respond. Though finally she did. "I do not know the details. I know the gossip. I also know the results." Marta sipped her coffee and gazed across the room at a grand piano in the corner. "It happened a couple of years ago. Dmitri was the official court composer then. He gave music lessons to many high-born nobles. He was very popular both as an instructor and as a dinner guest. There was a girl, a distant cousin of the emperor, if you believe the gossip. Sticking to the facts, the two attempted to elope, and they were caught by the girl's family. The girl was ruined and sent to live in a convent, and Dmitri was more or less exiled from court, banned from playing in the city or having his music performed." Camilla listened intently. The words, "for your enjoyment only," flashed across her mind. Oh dear. She had never gotten around asking him about that, and then she played it anyway, and he hadn't said anything about it. Camilla mentally shook herself and smiled at Marta. "Well, an elopement may be scandalous in the higher circles, but it's common as green grass among the lower orders," Camilla said. "I think I prefer to make my own opinion of the man rather than judging him for something in the past, though I am sorry for the girl." "As am I," Marta said. She picked up her cup from the saucer and set it down again a few times before setting the whole on the low table with the depleted refreshment stands. Marta's short, dainty fingers plucked at a bit of lace on her gown. Then she looked Camilla in the eye and said, "I am fond of Dmitri, but he is a magnet for trouble. I introduced you to him largely so you will know who it is best to stay away from." Marta leaned over and spoke more quietly into Camilla's ear. "I would not see you harmed by an association that can only do you ill. He is a good man, but you must remember, you are a noblewoman now. You are no longer of the lower orders." Camilla nodded as if she understood. She didn't, but there was no further time to inquire as the gentlemen rejoined the ladies, and Dmitri came instantly to her side. Camilla tucked away Marta's words deep in her mind to mull over later. For now, she would enjoy the evening with her composer.